Hey everybody, this is CJ, and I thought I'd take this opportunity to walk through a quick patch from scratch, as they call it in the business. I get a lot of questions, especially from friends and family, about what the hell is going on here. This is my modular synth. And a modular synth is an apparatus, an instrument that is made up of individual modules, seen here, that you can sort of mix and match and rearrange in a case to build the perfect instrument for exactly whatever kind of music you're hoping to make. So this is mine. I've been working on it for a while. I've been really into modular for maybe 2 years, a little over 2 years. And I've sort of settled on this design, which helps me create these generative ambient pieces of music. I'm not a piano player. I have a little bit of music theory, but not a lot. But what I really like is the sort of Zen feeling that you get from setting up complicated systems with rules and logic and letting the instrument kind of play itself. That's what's really exciting to me. That's what I like to do with this machine. And we're going to walk through some of the techniques I use to build those ambient generative patches today. So as you can see, we have a number of modules. Each one does something different. I'm not going to go through all of them today, but as we sort of activate them in the patch, I will explain what exactly is going on. Over off to the side here, there's something that you can't see, but it's called the Squarp Instruments Pyramid. And the pyramid is a MIDI brain of sorts. It's a sequencer for MIDI information, and MIDI is the sort of language that musical instruments can use to talk to each other over wires. So if you see up here in this corner, there are 2 patch cables that are currently in the system. The rest of the system is completely bare. But these 2 patch cables are bringing in clock and run information to a module called Pamela's New Workout from ALM Busy Circuits. Pamela's New Workout is maybe my favorite module of all time. And what it is a clock module. So Pamela's New Workout is able to send clock and sync information to every other module in my rig. And that allows me to keep everything in sync and in tempo. And the 2 cables that you see here are feeding or receiving that tempo information from the pyramid off to the left. So I use that pyramid kind of as my central hub, my brain for the rest of my system. And currently it's sending 120 beats per minute over this cable to this module. And when I press play over here on the left, you can see that this module started to light up. And for instance, these top 3 are currently set to just be a pulse of a 120 beats per minute. And that's usually how we'll start every single patch. So for this instance, let's say I wanted to bring that tempo down to, let's go with around 100 beats per minute. I'll adjust that over here on the left. And you probably can't see it, but that is updated here on this machine to say 100 beats per minute. So now, kind of the core of my generative modular system is this module called Marbles from a company called Mutable Instruments. Maybe my second favorite module of all time. And what Marbles is a random sampler. What that means is it samples randomness. So, and again, I don't really understand exactly all of the intricacies behind any of these modules. I'm still learning a lot, a beginner in a lot of ways. But what Marbles does, it is constantly generating random voltages. And voltages are the way in modular that we are able to send information between modules. That could be information like pitch. What pitch should a note be? Gate information. When should that note fire? CV, control voltage, is sort of easy to think about as invisible little fingers that move knobs and parameters on these other modules using electricity. So for instance, there's 2 sides to Marbles. Here on the left, we have gate information. When should a note or event fire? And on the right, pitch information. And pitch, of course, is what you know to be how high, how low an individual note is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these copies of the 100 beats per minute signal. I'm going to feed it into the clock input on marbles. So now all of these events, both the changes in the gate triggering and the changes in the pitch triggering, are happening to that 100 beat per minute clock. So this is currently outputting a division of the clock, and it's sort of choosing randomly to the left or right here on these two. I'm not sure if you can see that, but when these events fire, and over here, it's sort of cycling randomly. There are some parameters we can set here. I'm not sure we'll get into that today, but it's sending pitch information that's changing on sort of a random division of that clock. So for instance, something I like to do is to take pitch information out from one of these three options. I'm going to put it into the pitch in on a module here called Scales from a company called Intellijel. Scales is a pitch quantizer, which means that this is sort of a random, messy, non-musical pitch information out of marbles, is going into Scales, which is going to take that pitch information. If you can see here, this red light is the quantized version of the pitch that it's receiving. So say it's getting information out of marbles, and that pitch isn't quite snapped to a specific note. You can set your scale here. I have this currently just set to a C major scale, and it will snap that random pitch into a more musical division of the voltage. So currently we're putting in random pitch and we're getting quantized random pitch out. And then to tell Scales when a note is triggering, I'm just going to take one of these random gate outputs and put it into the trig input. So now the quantization of that note is happening when marbles sends a random pitch. Currently can't hear anything, so don't be surprised. What we're going to do is we're going to take the output, so the pitch output from Scales, that's the quantized version of the pitch that we're giving it from marbles, and we're going to put it into the 1 volt per octave input of this module, which is called Deckard's voice. It's a CS80 single voice clone. It's probably my favorite voice in Modular right now. I'm going to take the trig out, which is simply a copy of the trig in, and I'm going to put it into the gate input to Deckard's voice. So now I'm going to take one of these cables, which is going to my mixer over here to the right. I don't think you can see it. And we're going to feed it the audio out from this VCO, this voltage controlled oscillator. An oscillator is something that makes noise. It's controlled by voltage. Let's hear what it sounds like. All right, so now we have some music, technically. I'm going to move it up a couple of octaves here so we can hopefully hear it a little bit better. So what you're hearing is electricity passing through a series of modules, which is taming that electricity into a musical expression of a series of values. So we have clock, how quickly things are happening, the rate at which things are happening, feeding into a random sampler, which is outputting pitch and gate information. So how high or low a note should be, how often that note should fire, to a quantizer, which is quantizing that random voltage into a more musical division of that voltage, which is going into a voice, which is part of the synthesizer that we can hear. With the exception of sort of the randomness I'm introducing here as a part of the generative patch, this is essentially how every synthesizer works. There is a signal that is feeding pitch and gate information into a voice, which is how we hear. So the beauty of Modular is that we're able to expose a lot of those internal components of a synthesizer and bring them to the surface, so you can patch and change how these systems interact to really get something unique and interesting with a lot of control, as opposed to a rigid form factor like a synthesizer that might just have a keyboard and that's the only way that you can interact with it. Okay, so we have this sort of non-repeating, not very musical voice coming out of Deckard. And say we want to tame this kind of random system into a more musical, repetitive song, for lack of a better term. It's going to take a while. But the first step I always do is activate a couple of features on marbles, which will hold the pattern, that is the sample of the randomness, and repeat both the trig information and the pitch information in an 8-step loop. So we essentially have a full bar of music, which is playing over and over, and will repeat forever until we introduce some more randomness later, which we will do. Let's listen to that now. So the first thing any good ambient patch needs is a little reverb. I have a guitar pedal, an effects pedal off to the left here called the Specular Tempus. And with my mixer on the right, I can feed this signal over to that pedal to introduce a little bit of reverb, which makes everything sound better, of course. All right, what do we need next? Let's do a bass line. So this is not, you'll find with Modular, there are a million ways to achieve every musical function. This is something with my generative patches that I like to do, is to create a bass line by using sample and hold. So we already have a repeating series of pitches and gates coming out of scales. And an interesting thing that we could do to do a bass line is to sample at a certain point in time the pitch information coming out of scales and hold it until the next time we tell it to change pitch. So for instance, maybe we want to change, let's say that we want to have a bass line that changes every 4 bars or thereabouts. I have a module up here called Noise Tools, which allows me to input a voltage, in this case pitch, have a trigger for when I want Noise Tools to sample and hold that pitch, and then output the sampled and held pitch information, and I can send that to another voice. In this case, maybe we'll send it to STO down here. So first, I'm going to disconnect this, and I'm going to take this pitch information, and I'm going to put it up to this module, which is called a mult. And what it's doing, it's just taking input of one signal, and it's copying that same signal out 4 times. Incredibly useful in a modular system. So let's reconnect our main melody line. And now with a second copy, I'll take this signal and I'll input it in to Noise Tools. And then I'll take a division of our clock here from Pam, and I'll put that into the trig input up here. So now we can't hear it yet. What's happening is whenever this output from Pam fires, it is sampling the voltage that is coming out of scales, the same one we're hearing in Deckard's voice here, and it's going to output it to this output. So I just simply need to connect that output called hold and send it to the 1 volt per octave in of STO down here. So I'll take another one of my inputs to my mixer. It's a little loud, and now it's not the most musical, but it is outputting, whenever this trigger fires from Pam, a held version of the same voltage going to Deckard. So in effect, we've just created a bass line. Not a very good one, not a very musical one. We don't have a filter in chain yet, but let's take care of that. So now that we have a little bit of a rolling bass line going, what should we look at next? Maybe we want a second version or second quantized copy going out to a second synthesizer. So up here I have a module called the ER301, which is an incredible, almost modular in a box. And what I'm going to do is open up a synthesizer called Polygon. And what we need to give Polygon is some pitch information and some gate information. So I'm going to take pitch out from the second output of Scales. And I'm going to take a second random output from Marbles. I'm going to feed it to the second input here. So now we should have a second series of notes being output from this output to the ER301. So now we simply need to feed it some trig information. Maybe we'll do this fast 16th note out of Pam. And then I just need to make the connections internally from these inputs to what Polygon is outputting. So this is our trig, just coming in on B1. This is our pitch, which is coming in on A1. And now I need to make that connection to the mixer by having the output here. Again, not exactly musical. But it is in key, which is important with any generative patch. So maybe we'll make these notes a little longer. And maybe we'll send a second copy of this signal out to a module called Beads. And what Beads is a granular effects processor. Let's listen to it now. And so Beads is taking audio in from the synthesizer on the ER301, and it is recording it to a buffer. And you can imagine as if it's a long piece of cassette tape, audio tape, and there are multiple playheads on that tape that are randomly playing tiny little chunks of that audio back. And we can change how many tape heads there are, how the frequency at which they're hitting the tape, how long they're playing, the shape of the envelope for the sound, etc. by these knobs here. We just kind of leave it as is for now. Let's isolate and see what that sounds like. Pretty, right? That's the sort of ambient wash that you hear on a lot of modular videos. It's really the sound that got me into modular in the first place. Just makes everything sound better. And in context, it sounds like this. So that's really the basics. We have a bass line, a main melody, we have a secondary contrapoint melody, and texture. Where the beauty comes in is when we start to introduce modulation. And my favorite module for modulation is a module called Batumi here. And what it is 4 synced LFOs. LFO is a low frequency oscillator. So if you think of a wave, a really fast wave goes up and down and it can go so fast that it vibrates the air and it hits our ears and we can hear it. A low frequency oscillator works exactly the same way, except at a very, very slow rate. And what that means is we can't hear it, but it is useful for introducing control voltage or CV to some of the exposed parameters here on the modular. So for instance, if I take a sine wave out very slow, and let's say I wanted to introduce it to, what's something you could hear? Maybe the fall of the note over here in polygon. So I'll choose another input. I'll assign it to the fall here. It's A2. And now what we have is an oscillator over here affecting the rate at which this value changes. Another fun thing to do, especially with a generative patch, is to take another LFO and assign it to this parameter called deja vu on marbles. So marbles will helpfully, let's use a square wave, will helpfully keep the same sampled randomness forever until you start to introduce deja vu, which means sometimes on purpose, marbles forgets notes from within that sampled randomness and starts to fill them in with other notes. What that means is that you can have over time, you can hear it already, a very slowly changing melody, which still remains musical because we're quantizing it with scales. So one of my favorite things to do is to set up a complicated system like this and just walk away for a couple of hours. And that allows me to then come back and be surprised with this almost living collaboration between me and this machine, where over time it will evolve into something totally new and unexpected. And well, it's just, a very zen experience to listen to. It's also really beautiful, a beautiful way to find moments that you can clip out, be inspired by, or even use the audio that you've recorded in a fuller composition. That's sort of the addicting part of modulars, discovering those accidents that could really border on the sublime, frankly. I think that's why people who are really into modular, especially generative modular, see the collaboration between yourself and the system as a relationship almost that you build on over time. So this is not my best work. It's arguably not even very good, but it should give you a good idea of the process that I go through to create a simple generative patch. It comes with no real ideas outside of the way in which I'd like to route. Ooh, that was nice. The way in which I'd like to route these systems to set in motion sort of a evolving, forever renewing, interesting patch that I can listen to and tweak. I can tweak parameters and knobs until I've really tamed it into something I really like. So hopefully this was helpful. I'll probably do another one. I have a few different methods by which I like to get to this point, which is really the starting point for a nice patch. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this helped understand what the hell it is I'm doing on these videos every day. Thanks so much.